All right, Tim, welcome to the High Performance Podcast.
How you doing? Good.
Yeah, man, thanks for being here. So just for everyone listening, like Tim and I go back a fair while. I met you at the very beginning of a Viore event.
Yeah, that's right.
Back in the day.
So you're representing here?
Yes, of course. And I was very keen to have you on today just to talk about everything recovery. Okay. Obviously, bearing in mind that most of the listeners will be interested about recovery from like a training perspective. One of the big things I wanted to dig into today was the difference between injury, getting injured, and recovery from injury, and then just recovery for general athletic individuals. But like, tell everyone a little bit about yourself and like what you're excited about discussing today.
Well, so I grew up in New Zealand, and that's where I did my degree in physiotherapy. What led me to physiotherapy was actually always being injured. Spent more time in the physio clinic rather than on the rugby field, and that's kind of like got to the end of school. It's like, what are you going to do? Well, kind of know how physio works. I'll give this a whirl. And that's, so that was working more in sports physio. By the time I got to the UK, I had a big passion for strength training. And it was kind of when that time, which is going back a couple of decades, been here a while, it was kind of still quite fractured. You had physiotherapy and you have personal training. And as it's progressed, as the last couple of decades have gone, it's merged closer and closer, as it should be. Like, it's not just go to a clinic and get a massage. Like, movement is one of the best things you can do for any injury. So say that first and foremost. Like, it's been a really nice blend. It's where my passion has gone into, staying athletic and also respecting my physiotherapy history. And it's like, well, they're both the same thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And do you find like a lot of people that come to you now have an interest in both, like getting stronger, more athletic, and recovering from an injury?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's happens to everyone. You sort of reach that age. Got a guy at the moment who's had amazing transformation, and he had a parent die. Suddenly made him aware of his own mortality, and that was like, oh shit! Like, I need to be around for my kids.
Yeah.
So a real trigger for him. Like, it wasn't just about the abs or getting strong. It was, he wants to be moving well. He wants to be able to play with his kids. He wants to be able to be around when they're graduating, when they're getting married, and all the rest of it. It makes so much sense. I mean, I don't have kids yet, but I can understand what that must be like.
Yeah.
So he's I think it's something that happens to all of us. We want to be able to move as well as we used to, not just have the big muscles and the abs.
I think that's honestly appreciation that comes a little bit with age though as well.
Yeah.
Like, I remember from my early days lifting, I couldn't care less about any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And all of my motivation was just getting as big and as strong as possible. And then definitely throughout my 20s, I feel like even I was earlier than my friends at like realizing the importance of mobility and the longevity of lifting. But now I'm approaching 30 as well. Like, you definitely can't train the same you used to 10 years ago, almost at every single 10-year jump.
Yeah.
Right. Like, the difference you'll train at 40 compared to 30 is also going to be different again.
Approaching 30 and you're talking about aging. Don't even start.
This is what I mean. Early adopter, man. Early adopter.
Dude, I'm exactly the same. I had, it's funny because I emphasize mobility and I talk about it a lot. And just because I have a history of physiotherapy doesn't mean that I respected it. I did all the idiotic stuff when I was getting into strength training in my 20s too. Didn't warm up, didn't do my mobility drills, and just went for it. So it's also stuff that isn't just, I guess, my profession. It's stuff that I've done wrong along the journey.
Learned from experience.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
For sure. I think that is a rite of passage as well.
Yeah, totally.
Then you can apply some sort of like personal story to it, which I think is important.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Cool. So let's dive in. Starting off with kind of understanding a little bit more about the background of recovery. I think it's important to define what we mean by it. A lot of people tend to have a meaning of recovery in like specific response to what they're going through. But like, how do you think of it just on a broad term? Physical, mental, injury, just every part of everyday life? Like, where does it really sit for you?
Well, the big one, when you say mental, that's kind of been not got the respect it deserves, I think, in the past. And we're as a society, we're kind of more aware of mental health now. And I think that's a massive factor. And that actually ties in to the most important thing about injury is movement. I know that sounds crazy. Like, look, if you've got a fractured femur, I'm not going to say go out and go for a walk. I'm not saying that. Or if you've got a complete prolapse of a disc and you can't move, totally get it. But a lot of people, and I think this is just sort of old school medical advice, is like, okay, you've strained your back, you've got a disc bulge. Just take a couple of pills, lie in your bed until the pain's better. That's not the worst thing you can do. doing as much as you can, like edging into your pain, is the best amount of activity you can do. You don't want to make it extremely painful or make it worse, but you want to be able to work up to that tolerance, because the more you move, A, you're going to get less muscle wasting due to your deactivity, and B, you're telling your body that everything is okay and your body's going to do the rest.
Yeah. I fully agree. I feel I've explained to clients before in the way that you like visualize a speedometer on a car. It's like if your full right hand side, like 10 out of 10 is the most painful you felt, the most pain you felt, and then 0 the other side being you just chilling, feeling absolutely nothing, sleeping at bed at night, hopefully pain free. The further you can push yourself into maybe like starting it initially like a 3 or 4 that you can easily come back from, proves to yourself that movement isn't going to be like 0 to 100 straight away.
Anti-fragile. You're aware that you can come. It's not going to leave you in that pain. It's going to come back down. That it's okay.
And so how much of that do you think is like mental for your confidence compared to actually helping the rehab physically?
Well, I think it's both. And, this goes into a whole lot of psychosocial issues as well. Like it can be cultural. It can be unique to the individual, like how they perceive pain. Like pain does originate in the brain. Like that's unique to everyone. And the thing is, people that focus too much on their pain, and this is not discounting anyone that's in chronic pain to say, hey, just forget about your pain for a little bit. But the more you focus on it, funnily enough, the more you're aware of it. So it's almost like, again, not going hell for leather and doing risky things to make the injury worse, but doing activity around your pain to take your mind off it. Because your body, like I said, your body's just going to pump blood. It's going to get rid of like cell metabolites and all the bad
waste product.
Waste products and so forth. And by doing that, you're just going to help to flush the system, and your body's going to start to feel good on its own. This is the biggest secret of physiotherapists, is that you don't really need us. Like you're going to be okay by yourself. Everything is fine. Like your body's just going to do we might be able to speed some of that up and tell you what to do, but ultimately your body's going to handle it.
Yeah. And but you bring up a good point, and this is a bit of a tangent, but when people are in pain, and even if they perceive it, and some people I definitely am aware of, like have a high tolerance to push through. The key that I think physios are best at unlocking is finding the exercises that enable them to find that like sweet spot of 3 or 4 out of 10 on the pain spectrum, and enabling them to sort of like rehab in a safe way. How would you go about finding those exercises for people who aren't aware of what they look like?
Well, again, this comes down to it's individualized, right? So I'm the first one to admit there's no such thing as a bad exercise. But there are bad exercises for some people, or they're ones that are less preferable. So part of my journey was having a spondylolisthesis, and I actually have a number of clients with the same thing. It's essentially a fracture of the back of your one spinal segment off the spinal column, and it caused shifting. Now, it happens a lot in adolescence in rotation sports, and in having that, shear forces aren't great for me. So I would still be a meathead and do all my deadlifts without warming up in my 20s, because I was loving my passion for strength training. And one session out of 100, I would have an episode where I have this intense back pain. I can't put my socks on for a couple months, and it would be horrific. So it's just, deadlifting is not a bad exercise, but for me with a spondylolisthesis, it's not worth it. Like just that one episode. So I modify. I do Romanian deadlifts where you're starting from a high start, because you can brace. Going into that shear force where you're in a full hip hinge is a little bit safer, because with a normal deadlift, you're in a hip hinge at the like a shear force rather at the very bottom, and that's what I found works for me, and obviously works for other people that suffer with a spondylolisthesis. Unilateral work for me is important as well, because with a spondy, because you've got that slightly unstable segment, you need better core and you need better balance. So that's what's good for me. Now, another one is a really common one is an upright row. There's nothing wrong with an upright row. For me, I've had a couple of episodes with a rotator cuff injury, and I think I can train my delts and my front delts and so forth in a better way than doing a upright row.
Okay.
Yeah, and traps and so forth. So for me, it's not worth it. But again, it doesn't mean it's a bad exercise. It's unique to the individual.
Yeah.
And this is what I think everyone needs to be aware of. This is why someone seeing a a session in a magazine or doing a new one every day, right? Which you'll be the same as me. You're trying to advise against that, because you're throwing so much at your body, and your body, it doesn't necessarily have the mobility for it. You don't know where you stand. The key there is you've got to understand which exercises are unique and best for you at correcting whatever muscle imbalances or whatever goals you have.
Yeah. It's the age old thing, and I was always up for this when I was younger as well. But when you realize that you can't just copy your favorite celebrity's workout routine,
100%, yeah,
right,
yeah.
Everyone watches Zac Efron and Baywatch, and you're like, I'll just do what he did because he looked great.
Yeah,
he's gone through that of like finding out exactly what exercises help him best and all that stuff. And I completely agree. I think I had this other analogy I always used to use of like a cup filling up with water, in the sense of your exercises and your daily load, or your weekly load, or however you were viewing it. In your case, like every 1 in 100, you'd be slowly filling this cup up of your threshold.
Yeah.
The top of the brim of the cup is your threshold. And when you spill, like that's this potential for injury to really just heighten.
Yeah.
And it almost doesn't matter what you fill the cup with. It doesn't matter how you load your body necessarily. Once you push it over the capacity that it's used to, the injury's way higher risk.
Yeah, Lane Norton talked about that recently. It was really fascinating, and he talked about how it can be completely unrelated to even physical activity, stress in your relationship, stress in work, all these factors. Like we'll have to try and find the study, but it showed that there's just as much that responsible for your pain and for your injury than actual physical exertion. Or whatever activity it is that you comes around at that time when you feel that pain. And that this actually hits exactly what we're talking about here. When you talk about filling the cup, well, what's the thing that's going to, I guess, shorten your cup or fill your cup with so much already is lack of recovery, right? Things like sleep.
You're starting with your cup half full already.
Exactly, yeah. So you've got less tolerance for it. So, and that's why recovery is pretty important.
Yeah. I think a lot of people tend to latch onto the thing that kind of pushes them over, right? It's like they'll do the exercise that will then result in an injury or give them a bit of a bad feeling, and they'll then completely demonize that exercise and say that was the thing that caused that. It's a bit of a minefield, but it's not always the case.
Yeah.
It could just be you were tired, you were stressed, you had 3 hours sleep the night before. You could have done that any other day and it would have been fine.
Totally.
But you chose to do it today and it was wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's exactly it. It may not have been my spondy when I had those episodes. I have an unstable segment in my spine, but did I sleep well? How long was I sitting for before that gym session? Did I do my mobility? All those things play and take into account with everything.
And I think to help people not necessarily get super confused and say like, no exercise is ever going to cause you pain, I think the best way that I tend to think of that is if you've been doing an exercise repetitively and one day it potentially has like, or one day it feels worse, or one day it tweaks a certain muscle and you're a little bit cautious of it, that's probably a good indication that that exercise is good. You just felt pretty bad on the day. Whereas if you're trying something because you've seen the PT next to you do it, and it happens in an instant, probably a bit of a different,
because I mean you've got to factor in like everybody has a limit to how much load they can carry in every exercise. So there's always going to be a weak link. So I'm sorry to go back to my lower back again, but in most exercises, that's where my broken link is going to be. It's where I'm most likely going to injure myself here. Now, that doesn't mean the exercise is necessarily bad, but you're right. You push up into that level, you have a slight tweak. You're like, okay, this needs a little bit more work. And that's when you bring in other exercises and whether it's isolation or core work to work on that specific link in the chain. Right?
Yeah. But I think just to summarize and give people like a bit of a tip to walk away with, definitely important to find out what exercises suit you best, put them in a structured program, and then just work on progressing those.
Hire a coach. Don't go off a magazine workout.
Yes. And even worse, maybe don't do random workouts.
Yeah.
Right? Change it every time you go into the gym just because you get bored. I've always thought about that in the sense of like, if it was a program that worked for you and you could see results, you wouldn't get bored because people don't like losing.
Yeah.
It's just the sense of you don't feel like you have the momentum that's built up from the plan.
I mean, we can talk about sort of frequency of changing workouts. I think this is one that I think a lot of coaches struggle with. So when you're bringing people on board that maybe are less experienced with the gym and they think you're supposed to change your workout every few weeks or every week, every session. And it's like, if my clients knew that how sometimes phases of mine I've been on for months on end, the same sessions. Like I will always try and make a program interesting enough. So modify the exercises slightly, but only enough so that I can still work on those prime movements and keep them interested, rather than throw something different at them every single session, which is, I guess, what a lot of people are conditioned to when they're taking exercises from a magazine or from Instagram and so forth. But it's the reality that I think most people, new to exercise, need to be aware. You've got to do the same stuff again and again and again, get stronger with it, and stop chopping and changing. And once you adapt to an exercise, and once your strength is adapted, then you can look at progressing it or moving on to something different.
Yeah,
it's spending that time, especially if it's working and you're seeing progress. What's the point in changing it?
I think it's just the nature of the beast as well, that the people who come in with that mentality that do want very varied workouts are also just so happen to be the people who probably could really do with the structured training program.
Yeah, and are always injured.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They're like, I'll keep changing my exercises because this one's not good for me.
Yeah.
It's like, hang on a sec, just stick with it, find a way to make it work.
Yeah.
Like you said, like even changing your deadlift to an RDL.
Yeah.
Something as simple as that.
Same movement pattern.
But then you just get massively strong in your RDL.
Exactly.
You're going to develop the same muscles that you would have in a deadlift. You're going to look just as great as you would if you got really strong in a deadlift. You're just not going to have these injuries.
It's slightly safer for some people, and that's the reason.
I've had the exact same thing with my squat and raising my heels.
Yeah.
I always used to be a huge supporter of the minimalist squat movement and trying to squat.
I was the same as you. I was like, who uses a heel raise? And now I'm like, actually, it feels really good.
It feels great. I always used to squat like in my socks or barefoot as well. And sooner or later, I just realized that, like, hang on a sec, every single time I do this, I feel something tight. Yeah. Whenever I raise my heels, it's feeling so much better. So I'll just get really good at heel raise squats. And then after like 4 weeks, I was like, this is how I'm going to squat now.
Mate, I miss back squats probably more than deadlifts. So back squats are another one that, it's a little bit more shear force. So I don't cope that well with it. But a front squat, because I'm more vertical, the weight's here, so your torso has to be more vertical, less shear force in the spine. So much more comfortable, but my God, they're a bitch. Like, it's a love-hate, but I do miss back squats. And that's another thing that I have to kind of just be very cautious with. I can't go for maxes. I sort of stick to something that works for me,
Yep.
Yeah. But
for sure.
as you said, if I do a back squat with a heel raise, I do feel a lot better, which kind of, when I first noticed that, I was like, damn it, the heel raise thing was the way forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just the thing, you have to drop your pride at the door and just find out what works for you.
Yeah, for sure.
What's the recovery hierarchy?
Oh, yeah. So, well, I think when people get they dig into all this recovery stuff, you want to get the best blue light blocking glasses, and you want to get the earplugs and the mouth tape, and all that stuff's good. I use some of that as well. But there's spending money on not useless stuff, but then there's the prime. What am I trying to say? The stuff that's going to give you the biggest bang for your buck is the basics. It's like your sleep, getting 8 to 9 hours. Vitamin D is pretty good for recovery. If it's just just steps, even just walking, okay, like that's a pretty low impact activity that could, again, just gets your blood pumping, gets rid of those cell metabolites, all the buildup, so forth from your previous session or from sitting down for a long period of time. And I think that a lot of people, you just go on Instagram, once you look at one of these ads, you push all these like expensive and just useless things. Okay, again, not useless, but I'm like the latest mushroom tea that's going to help your recovery and your, like I said, the blue light blocking, the infrared lights and all the rest of it. And sure, if you've got the money to spend that and you're doing all the other stuff first, great. But most people aren't doing the other stuff first.
Yeah.
And that's what just blows my mind. Like it's why are you worrying? Why are you stepping over pounds to pick up pennies?
Sure.
It's
the exact same thing with diet as well. I'm sure. It's
massively,
like, if you're not eating your protein or hitting your vegetable intake, but then you just want to go and buy the latest supplement that's going to like apparently cover all those bases for you.
Yeah.
It's normally, if it's too good to be true, it probably is.
Yeah, I'm not bagging out biohackers, but it's like I've got a lot of friends that are biohackers, and no issue with it. For some reason, I don't like the term. I just can't stand it. Yeah, but I've been to these symposiums for biohackers, and a lot of nice people. As I said, I've got friends that are into their biohacking. But you see so many people there that, again, they've got their blue light blocking glasses on, and they're chewing the methyl blue, whatever it is, and they've got their grounding shoes on and spending all this money. and yet they don't. And this is not body shaming. Okay, I'm not a body shamer, but they don't look like they train.
Yeah.
They're not training, and it's like, okay, what's the one thing we know that is the key to longevity? It's muscle mass and training. So why are you here trying to sell all this expensive product when you don't do the most important thing?
Yeah.
You don't do the most important thing for yourself. Like, how is that biohacking? Do you see my point?
Yeah.
I'm kind of getting fired up with it.
No, I'm completely
it makes
the same.
no sense to me. Like I don't get it.
I'm not into trying to call people out, but like I read something the other day that the way that you look is the most honest reflection of your choices. And I think it's entirely true when it comes to health predominantly, more so than other things like maybe happiness or wealth or other things. But for your health, there is a huge argument to say if you don't look the way that that you would imagine a fit person would look, then then your choices probably more often than not reflect
suboptimal.
that.
Yeah. But you're not allowed to say that these days.
Well,
this is the thing.
we might get cancelled for that.
Yeah, but it's so true, mate. I agree with you totally, and it's like, that works the opposite way as well. I mean, a lot of people. I mean, you must have clients coming to you, the same as me, that they're not necessarily looking for a transformation. They're not looking for abs and all the rest of it. They want to just be healthier. It's like, well, guess what? The side effect is you are going to get abs and you are going to look better.
Yeah.
And that just shows that, as you said, it's tied together. Like you can't do one thing and not have the other.
Exactly.
You just can't.
And I think that shows, and I've seen people, and I completely imagine the person you're talking about, of this person who goes 100% on all the accessories. They're doing all the half percenters, but then they're missing the foundation of like 9 hours sleep, even 8,000 steps a day. And training with resistance like 3 times a week.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me if they're splurging their own money, but it's when they're selling a product and they don't look like they're training, that's what pisses me off. You're trying to get money off these people to improve their health, and like, why aren't you doing the most important thing if you are a true believer in biohacking?
So let's just reiterate the basics then. So you mentioned 8 to 9 hours of sleep, 7 to 8 hours.
Yeah.
Somewhere within that threshold is pretty decent.
Yeah.
I think most people I'm aware of and coach are around the 7.5 mark.
Yeah.
And they consider that like a good day.
Yeah. Oh, dude, I remember the days I used to get 9. I loved it. But yeah, so most of us around, it's a stretch.
7 to 8 is realistic.
Yeah.
Steps, anywhere that you typically suggest aiming for?
Yeah, I think the consensus is like law of diminishing returns. Over 8,000 is great, but look, if it's 6,000 and you were doing 2,000 the week before, like bravo, like it's all from where you were previously. But the more that non-exercise attributed thermogenesis, NEAT, the more of that, the better.
Yeah. And I think even just away from, when I think of NEAT, I always think about it in terms of like being able to eat a little bit more, diet on higher calories, and it's very much a visual thing. But I think regardless of that, the way that you tie it into recovery, having a higher step count just for general longevity, joints, mental health, walking outside. Like, I don't know anyone who walks and gets their steps inside, but so every time you do, you're going to have to step outside. It's good for you.
Yeah, no, totally. Well, and believe it or not, that does, even if it's at such a low intensity, it's still beneficial to your cardiovascular system. Yeah. And it's great.
Sleep, steps, nutrition. You mentioned vitamin D.
Yeah, that's a massive one, especially this time of year.
Yeah, anyone not living in hot places, it's almost always beneficial to have a supplement.
So this is going to be coming back to pouring in on biohackers, but again, people selling stuff like, I'm not begging out NAD and those other sort of newer supplements which are more expensive. Studies are mixed, fine, but like, why is there so much promotion online about NAD and all these different supplements, these new supplements, and not for omega-3 fish oils, which have been around for years? We know, like, the research there is that they're just so amazing. They're so good for our health. Vitamin D, so amazing, and it's not talked about because it's not cool, right? It's not new, it's not edgy. And I don't like, it's so much more beneficial than all these other expensive supplements and these herbal teas and these mushroom teas and all the rest of it. I'm sure some of that works, but why don't we pick up or get the lowest hanging fruit first? The stuff that's going to be really good for you.
And that stuff's good all the time.
Yeah, exactly, and it's cheap. This is probably why it's not thrown at us on social media, is that people can't make as much profit from it.
Yeah, the sad reality.
Yeah.
Well. Yeah, and I'm interested to see like what you'd actually suggest and where you would suggest getting it from. So we'll drop those links in the description.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And give you guys just the basics of what you need.
Well, you've hit the nail on the head. You'll agree with me. Like vitamin D, like even the best vitamin D supplement, if you can get natural sunlight, that's always going to be better.
Yeah.
Like always try and get sort of, and if you're worried about sunburn during the summer, like 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes is fine. You're not going to get burnt in that. And then you're getting a nice dose of vitamin D to set you up.
Got you. But yeah, the next question is then obviously like what you need. If that's covered, it's where do you get it? And I know a lot of people tend to have a lot of questions.
Yeah,
about
totally. Yeah.
How pure these things are,
Yeah.
or whatever. So it's best just to probably link directly.
Totally. I'd say, yeah, and fish oils especially, because they can go rancid quite. There was a study in New Zealand done actually, like something like 80% of the samples from the different brands were rancid. So even if it's really good quality omega-3, rancid because of the, whether it's processing, storage, all the rest of it. So you want to always get fish oils that are, it's called the International Fish Oil Association, and the third party test it and so forth. Again, put links in that. We can put links in there.
Yeah.
But that's important. If there's one supplement that I think you've got to make sure has got good quality, it's your fish oils.
It's fish oil,
yeah.
For sure. I remember back at uni, I had a friend of mine who had fish oil in oil form.
Nasty,
without the
right?
capsule, and he left it there, and I think he'd had it for like the whole 3 years he'd been in this flat, and it was the drinking challenge. Like if you lost the game,
oh man,
you had to have a little shot of this fish oil.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
I'm very familiar with rancid fish.
Yeah. Well, even if they're not rancid, I've just never been into the oil, even though they can sort of take the flavor. I just prefer the capsules. But
for sure, I would recommend that to everyone.
Nasty.
It's like having unflavored whey protein for the first time.
Yeah, exactly.
Never. I don't know anyone who has unflavored whey protein now. What about recovery from injury and recovery in general life? Like, let's say someone's training, they're sore after they train, or they know that recovery is important so they can train optimally the next time they go to the gym.
Yeah.
How does that differ from injury, besides the obvious of don't repeat the thing that injured you and just be careful of that thing?
Yeah, I think, so with injury, I think it's just, just move as much as you can without causing more pain, because the sooner you do that, the sooner you can get back to doing all normal activities. I was thinking about this internal monologue. I was having an internal monologue about this training, and this I was not ahead of this. I just randomly was thinking about it, and it's like I had a client that was very similar to me, where they go on holiday for a couple of weeks. You know, he worried like around 2 weeks is where I get worried if I haven't trained, if I can't do anything. I'm like paranoid that I'm losing muscle mass and losing strength. I come back and I have my first session and I blitz. I get PBs on everything. 2 weeks seems to be the threshold. If I go over that, I won't come back stronger. But if anywhere in between that, which is generally, that means that I'm overtraining. So, but when I say overtraining, I don't look at it as necessarily a negative, because everyone talks about it like, oh, you should definitely never overtrain. And there's so many factors that come into that. Like if you're not, I'm not saying absolutely go balls to the wall and do a high rocks every day. But I'm saying a little bit of overtraining where, if you notice you go away on holiday for a week and you come back and you're stronger, okay, well, that means that before you went away on holiday, you were obviously not recovering enough because you weren't able to hit those higher numbers in your lifts, right?
Right.
But then you factor in, okay, well, what is the goal here? Were you doing anything that was going to likely cause injury? No, so you're still being careful, you still got the right technique, and you're still doing the right exercises. Okay, are you competing in a sport where you need to have your maximal strength and you need to be at the top of your game? No. Okay. So you are training a little bit under recovered, but what are you training for? And most people, you're training for strength and maybe aesthetics and all the rest of it. But a lot of us, and you'll be the same as me, I'm sure, is I do it for my mental health. So if I was needing to train so that I'm fully recovered every session, I wouldn't be able to train as often as I do. And I do that for my mental health. I like it. Some of us like that muscle pain. Some people hate it, especially new to a program.
Yeah.
But I actually sometimes, and this is not necessarily a good thing, you shouldn't chase it too much, but I like chasing that pump, and I like chasing that burn a little bit. It feels good. Now, if that means that I train that same muscle group a couple of days later and I'm sort of slightly under recovered, it's not a big problem. Like I don't see it as there's degrees, right? There's nuance to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know I just waffled there, but I hope that answered the question.
No, it's a good point. And I think it's interesting, the holiday analogy, because I know a lot of people who come back, whether it's a holiday or just time off the gym, and then they hit that strong session when they're back.
Yeah.
But their mentality towards it sometimes is the opposite, where it's like, oh, I actually just took the last 2 weeks off. Like, I don't even need to train.
Yeah.
And then they're lazier in the gym.
Yeah, no, fair.
And I think it's a good point to distinguish, is that particularly in a holiday where you've probably slept a little more, maybe you've eaten a little more.
Exactly. There's that as well, the sleep and the vitamin D, as we said. If you're doing all that, maybe it's not that you needed more time to recover.
Yeah.
Totally.
But then this idea that like for everyday people, you don't actually often get the opportunity to test or max out like an athlete would.
Exactly.
Whereas if there was a competitive athlete hitting a competition and they wanted to do their best, they would absolutely have a taper.
Yeah.
And so you're just effectively in the everyday athlete taper when you're on holiday.
Yeah.
But it's definitely not the case of like your body can get away with training less. And I think that's an interesting point to make is when I first saw this graph at uni of like the fatigue and the fitness correlation, where your fitness improves as your fatigue increases. But obviously there can only be a certain
There's
point.
a drop off after,
and then you go into that. That's where periodization comes in, and that's a whole other discussion. But like, it's still important that most people, I think, assume maybe that they should always feel amazing when they're trying to build this health and this body and this lifestyle that a lot of people, and myself included, like when I bring someone on as a coach, I'll sell the benefits of living healthy, which are feeling great, like looking fantastic, and just generally feeling good. But there is that point, there's the mountain to climb before you get there.
Did I mention you'll feel like you've been hit by a bus a couple of times a week? You
know, it can't just be a chairlift straight to the top and then you have the shortcut. So I think the people who I think get the best results are the people who learn to enjoy that process.
Yeah, totally. And that's so true. It's like a lot of people, it's a kind of it's a rite of passage. They're suddenly realizing, oh shit, not only am I sore, but I'm not enjoying every workout. It's like they look at us as fitness professionals and trainers and think we enjoy every workout. No, up to about 80% of them suck. Like we don't enjoy them.
But you enjoy the benefits.
Exactly.
After.
This is the thing. Like not every single session is going to feel amazing. This just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And as soon as you can get okay with that, you're like, well, you're going to do it anyway. So
yeah, and more importantly, the downside of not training and going through that small discomfort.
Yeah.
But then your sort of like last 30, 20 years being a huge discomfort.
Yeah.
That's for me what drives me most.
Yeah.
Like I think when you say you can become okay with it, sometimes that's a big ask for someone who isn't used to working out. They're like, how could I ever enjoy not really enjoying my workout?
Yeah. Long term, big picture.
But I think the drive and the why, a lot of people say like you have to find the reason why, and a lot of people tend to think of like, oh, that holiday next year or my wedding next year or like whatever. That's fine. That's a cool like short-term why.
Yeah.
But for me personally, that big picture of when I'm 50, 60, 70 and I have kids and grandkids, I do not want to be the guy like sitting in the deck chair watching them play. I want to be like right there with them.
Yeah.
So that's what I think about, especially when it comes to like recovery, because it's fun to train for like a 12 or 16 week period and feel like you're making insane progress. But then the question in the back of your mind is like, yeah, sure. Once the summer's over, or once you finish that really fun training block and it's time to kind of find a new program, what do you think about then? And I think I got okay with not having a short-term or an annual aesthetic goal. A couple of years ago, and I was just thinking I'm training for my future, and I'm okay with that, and I feel like it's fun in the short term and the long term.
Well, there's also genetic potential, and this is what I tell other people. Like for you and I, we've been like the differences that we can make in our aesthetic is so small. So for us, it's kind of silly to chase an aesthetic goal anyway, because it's going to be the rewards are very, very little for the amount of work that you'd have to put in, and it's like you do kind of become okay with it. You're like, well, I don't need to try and lose this extra % of body fat or X weight on the scale.
Pack on another centimeter from my bicep.
Yeah, like for the amount of work that would take for us, because obviously we're both natural. Like there's no unless you're juicing, it's extremely hard.
Yeah.
And it's like it's just not worth it.
For sure.
Yeah.
What about self-diagnosing injury? So one of the biggest things when someone potentially gets injured is that panic that sets in straight away. And the first port of call may be for most people to see a doctor or a physio. But there's always that time span in between, which I feel like they wonder if it's going to last.
Yeah.
Maybe you tweak something and you're like, okay, this is worse than it was before. Maybe it's not as bad, or maybe even worse, it's like the first time that something like that's ever happened.
Yeah.
What do you typically advise in that initial short term, like the next 48 hours?
What's interesting, so I had my fiance she got a tweak in her back in the gym a couple months ago, and because we were in the gym, I literally got her to do stuff straight away. And it was a tweak that she often gets, and I think many people get it. You know, you get a catch in your back and so forth. And I got her to do some stuff straight away. And just to put that muscle through its normal movement, because the muscle spasm in this case was secondary to like a little tweak of an intercostal muscle. A lot of people think it's like a rib. They feel like their ribs popping out. It's usually not that. But I got her to go through normal movements, getting the rib cage inflating and deflating with exhalation and so forth. So some deep breathing, as well as certain exercises using the shoulder blade. And her symptoms the next day were much less than what they normally are when they tweak themselves. So there are some injuries, sort of muscular, unless it's a significant tear or you're playing contact sports. This is why I have to always have caveats here.
Yeah.
But
most of the time in the gym, you're training on your own.
If you strain something, I'm not going to say go into a really deep stretch. But if if it's absolutely debilitating or you hear a tear, no, don't push through. But if it's suddenly you get this little muscle spasm, actually doing some mobility, not going super heavy, will actually be very good in terms of the recovery, shorten the recovery time. Now, if we want to talk about joints, stuff like that, if they swell up, swelling up is not a good sign. You should probably stop there. Again, if you can walk around the next day, best thing you can do because you're getting that blood circulation and all the rest of it. If it's painful, do something else. Don't sit there with your foot, again, as long as it's nothing significant, not a significant crack or a fracture of your bone. Don't sit around doing nothing. This leads me on to the ice thing. It's such the physio community can be really polarizing, and it's an interesting one because I've done studies saying that you shouldn't ice injuries now because that swelling or inflammation is really important because that's your body doing its natural thing. Which I err on the side of I still use ice and I still recommend ice. People are like, oh well, you're gonna halt the healing process. You're not really, because you're putting ice on for 5-10 minutes every couple of hours. So it's not really the time period that it affects. It's not going to have a huge impact. And on top of that, when you think about individuality, like if we take a sprained ankle, for example, I've seen people with a really significant tear or even like an avulsion where the ligament actually takes the little bit of fibular bone off the end. And I've seen it not really swell up before. And then I've seen people that have just tweaked their ATFL ligament, which is just at the front, mildly, and it's ballooned up. So we have all these individual differences as to swelling. And then on top of that, like how active is a person? Like if a person's not active generally anyway, and they sit around on a couch, are you really going to tell them not to try and get rid of some of that swelling with ice? Because there's someone that doesn't get a lot of circulation anyway. So these kind of studies in mice or in petri dishes, that, talking about the mechanisms and how we need that inflammation, I think it's just a little bit short-sighted. So if anyone's wondering whether they should still use ice or not, I would say use ice because you get that nice pain relief, it numbs it, and also reducing a little bit of swelling could be beneficial. Could be. I just think I have to bring that up because, like I said, they get really the physio society get really polarizing with this sort of stuff.
I can imagine. Everyone has an opinion for sure, especially on something as prevalent as that. But the pain relief thing is a big one. Yeah. I think most people tend to want to go about their day whenever they sort of run into something that's a bit inconvenient, like a tweak or a twinge or something. Yeah. And so that's always big. What about the ice packs where you ice it, like you said, every couple of hours compared to something like the heat patch where you would leave on? I used to use a lot of the deep heat things on my lower back. Yeah,
exactly. So for muscle strains, they can feel pretty good. If it's a joint and you've got there's a lot of swelling, I probably wouldn't use a heat patch. But again, I mean, would I tell someone not to go on the sauna? No, I'd probably say, do a sauna, but also do the cold at the same time. But if you're using a heat patch for muscle, that can feel great. The neck, for example, if you strain your neck, you're not going to want to put ice on it. It's horrible. Put heat on it. So there are exceptions to the rule.
And I think that's a good point as well of, ultimately, you need to find something that you actually can do or want to do.
Yeah.
And if I have this conversation a lot with deep tissue in the sense of foam rolling and deep tissue massage, whether or not which one is more effective we can get into, but I've always been under the impression that if you're genuinely not someone who's going to go and foam roll, or maybe you've never foam rolled and you can't even bring yourself to push as hard as your body requires on the foam roller, it's not a very pleasant experience. Yeah. Maybe just not doing any of that and having a 45-minute massage will give you what you feel like you need, or give your body what it needs.
The different tools, they're just tools in the toolbox. And I agree with you there. The difference is a foam roll. People that are used to doing foam rolling and enjoy it, enjoy is a strong word, but we do that. I tend to do that before a session. I advise that before a session. It stimulates. You're not lengthening anything, but you're stimulating the receptors in your muscles, and your brain is basically then more aware of that area and may allow you to get more length in it. Deep tissue, I'm not training after a deep tissue massage. I'm going to go home and go to sleep. So different time, but I totally agree with you. And I advise that for most people, and I'm probably one of the worst for self-care. I can't remember the last time I had a deep tissue massage. I wish I probably should have it more often. But yeah, different tools. But if someone's not doing one, definitely do the other one.
What's your opinion? So I get a lot of my guys doing mobility in between their strength training sessions, in between their strength training sets, when it comes to like their rest periods and trying to utilize that rest period a little bit more so in the gym.
Yeah. Like filler exercise or filler mobility.
Yeah. And I just became aware that if you zoomed out and looked at someone's typical gym session, especially if they were resting 2 minutes or more between sets, a lot of that time is just wasted. And we're talking about most people here walking into the gym maybe 3 to 4 times a week, training to like feel good and look good. You want to be ideally as moving as much as possible when you're in the gym. Not only is it like your only time to really be active, besides the rest of your day probably sat at your desk, but like there's also no benefit to you actually just standing on your phone. So
scrolling Instagram,
classic. On the end of the bench press, there was one point I looked up the other day at like 6 p.m. and every single person in the gym besides me was on their
crazy,
phone.
Isn't it?
There was like 5 people in there. And,
mental. But I mean, I'm guilty of it as well. I do the same thing.
Sometimes you need to check a message or two, but in general, I would say if you're really struggling to drop body fat, the best thing you can do, especially if you struggle to get your steps in, is probably superset some sort of walking activity or cardio between something.
Yeah, or supersetting anything is always a good idea. Like non-competing muscle groups, great way of getting more volume into your workouts. And I agree with you. Like I wouldn't see a problem with that mobility in between sets. Awesome. The only caveat I'd say to that is there's another nuance to this one, but static stretching apparently between sets is not good. When you're doing a static, say you do a deep static stretch before a squat, because your quad is stretched, you're occluding the blood supply, so it's not getting in there to get rid of that. The cell metabolites. God, I can't speak. Cell metabolites and lactic acid and so forth from your quads. Now, if you then go into a squat, because it's stretched, so the blood supply is limited. You see, because you're compressing the arteries and the capillaries and so forth, which makes sense, right? So you wouldn't then go and do a squat because you're going to be limited in your strength. Now you could then argue, well, it's almost like blood flow restriction training.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe you get more hypertrophy, but you're not going to get your max strength. And is there more risk of injury? Who knows? But then there's also studies that have shown that the effect of stretching a muscle before training it is very, very small. So again, everything with nuance. But as you say, I think it's important to clarify for anyone watching the difference between mobility and flexibility. Mobility tends to be stretching, but with movement, like taking your body through your full range of motion, and that's awesome for any time of day, any time during the workout, because it's essentially it's movement, right?
Yeah. And I also am a huge fan of those mobility flows or sequences first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
And they're not typically, you don't have to warm up to complete them.
No, exactly.
You actually warm up as you do them.
Yeah. They are warm-ups. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's great.
So I like the any time of day, anywhere, anytime sort of thing. The stretching with the squat is interesting. I used to train with someone who was super strong. He had good key lifts, squat, deadlift, bench and stuff. And he really didn't like stretching before. Almost even like he would warm up like a purposely limited amount because he thought that your natural stretch reflex in the muscle would sometimes be affected in something like a squat if you were to stretch your legs in that static way.
Interesting, yeah.
But I think generally my understanding of preparing, warming up, and then completing the session, and that also then would cover like mobility between sets, is keep it as dynamic as possible. Save the static stuff till you're warm, which is normally after the session.
And even then, only if you enjoy it. This is one of the sort of areas of research which I think shocks a lot of people is there's still no evidence that static stretching can increase muscle length. I'm not saying, I'm not bagging out like yin or types of yoga where you're holding these positions for a great amount of time, because you're getting so many other benefits. It feels really good. You're relaxing. but it's mobility and movement that is going to help your improve your muscle length over time. And even then, it's more neurological rather than actual physical adding length to your muscles.
Yeah,
there's a real interesting one. There's not a lot of science to support static stretching at all. But again, if it feels good and you find it helpful and it makes you more aware of those muscles or it makes you feel looser, hell, do it if you've got time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then adding weight to stretches as well, kind of also a controversial thing, but not a lot of people tend to think about mobility or flexibility with added resistance.
Yeah.
But it's something that I've become increasingly fond of and like use a little bit more now in my training.
Wasn't there recently a study about that too, about adding weighted stretch can actually be as effective as weight training for hypertrophy with some serious, it's crazy, right? So there's all these caveats to everything. It's
I think
mental.
I understood that as like, the spectrum was if you weight train in a very short range of motion, essentially if you just weight train badly, the muscle isn't going to be stretched to its full potential. And muscles like to be stretched, and they get very strong when they are stretched, and then compressed like the longest.
Stretch mediated hypertrophy.
So I think I heard something about that, where people who there was 3 groups: people who weight trained with no stretching, people who just stretched and didn't weight train, and then people who did both. Obviously the people who did both did the best, but the people who just stretched, there were people who did better than those who trained and didn't.
That stretching thing is, I want to point out that it's not just really beneficial for as you say, stretch mediated hypertrophy and potential growth, but it's also really injury protective. Like, people don't realize it's not trainers just being assholes telling people to train to full range. The more you train to full range, the better you're protected against injury, because injury often happens at full range. Like, think of a hamstring tear and all the rest of it. You have to be strong in all ranges throughout a rep or a movement. That's where you're going to get better body awareness, proprioception. That's what's going to protect you. And on that note, there's something that really does my head in, where you'll see this all the time. It's like typical guys doing chin-ups or curls, and they're literally just doing half reps. And then you try and say, look, you need to be doing full range so that you can get awareness, proprioception. And then they show you a video of Arnold and pumping iron, and he's doing partial reps. You have to try and explain. You almost have to earn the right to cheat during exercises. You know what I mean? Like, Arnold is very aware. He has really good proprioception. He's been training a long time, so he knows what he's doing when he's doing those counterfeit reps to get just the most amount of fatigue and the most amount of pump as he can. But that's my issue is when you see newbies doing that and they think it's okay because they've seen a video of someone else doing counterfeit reps, as they call them.
But it's prime injury suspects.
Exactly. Well, because exactly, they're not going to be. What happens when they do go full range? We'll do a proper bicep curl a little bit too heavy. They're just going to tear the bicep. And it's often always the case of like the people who don't have the biggest range of motion or cheat the reps. Also lift heavier than they should be, or lifting full range would make them significantly have to reduce the weight, which is more of a ego thing probably rather than a knowledge thing most of the time. Totally. Well, someone that says that they can whack out 15 chin-ups really easy. You're looking, okay, can I have a look at those chin-ups? Can I have a look?
For sure.
Yeah.
What about the role of nutrition when it comes to recovery? There's obviously like we mentioned earlier, there's some foundational basics, protein levels, just general calorie intake in general. What else?
I think what we covered before, like, it's the basics, man. Like, rather than spending all the money on expensive supplements or worried about, the latest powder that's from a monastery in Brazil or something or other, that's 30 quid for 100 grams or whatever. Like, it's the basics. Your meat and veg, your single ingredient foods, that's got to be the basis. 80-20 rule, essentially. It's got to be 80% of what you eat, and then don't overcomplicate it. I kind of wanted to touch on this before, and I talk about the biohackers. Biohackers paradox is that you can go kind of crazy worrying about too much. Like, I heard a really good analogy. Like, you think about Warren Buffett, who's one of the most famous traders in the world. And he eats McDonald's every day. He's overweight. Like, he shouldn't be alive. No disrespect, but he's very unhealthy. So, well, how is it that he's able to be alive, whereas someone who's fit and healthy or appears fit and healthy can drop dead of a heart attack at the age of 50? And it's like, I know that you can't, this is like anecdotal because it's one person, but it's like he manages his stress really well. He doesn't let stuff phase him. And I think that that's really underrated. I think we're going to discover more and more about your overall stress. And so where this comes into the whole biohacking thing is wondering about what to eat, and, oh shit, am I getting enough of this nutrient, and do I need this supplement? And you can even tie it into sort of the sleep. I've heard that if you try and biohack your sleep too much and wear the earplugs and the eye mask and make it pitch black, and you have to have optimal temperature and all the rest of it to get the best sleep. Okay, well, what happens if you have to go through a period where you don't have optimal sleep? Are you just not going to sleep because you're programmed to only be able to sleep in that perfect, pristine environment? So it'll almost stress you out more, or you're unable to sleep if things aren't perfect. And I think that this can happen to a lot of people as they get so caught up in the minutiae and having everything perfect. And just even if they make everything perfect, the stress of having to tick every box is a stress in itself. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that ties into the nutrition. Again, sorry for waffling, but it's one that I'm kind of getting more and more aware of. I've got a couple of clients that are heads of industry and CEOs of business, and they don't want to wear sleep trackers, and I don't want them to wear sleep trackers for that exact reason. They've said, if I track my sleep, it's another thing that I'm going to get concerned about. Like, you know what I mean? I totally get it. I mean, I wear a sleep tracker. I use it for I just want to know the data, but I don't get adhered to it. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
It's more just sort of a nerd out. And I think that that's a big thing facing us now, because we're tracking everything. We're being told 100 different things. And it's like, look, just get the basics right. And if trying to get perfect is stressing you out, that even when you reach perfect, that stress is not going to be good for you anyway. So it's kind of like this, it's a paradox.
It's the classic thing of like the perfect plan doesn't exist, but doing 80% of the things well
exactly
will often give you like 99% of the outcome that you're even looking for.
Totally.
I have heard the sleep, the stress around sleep, particularly with sleep trackers. Like I think a lot of fitness trackers track sleep, but people typically use them for things like steps and calories and other things like that, which falls into the same category. But I hear a lot of people talk specifically about stressing about the sleep, and I think it's because they have this perception that they can't really control it. Like you can't sleep better. When you're asleep, your body is
doing
asleep.
what you can, right?
But I also, maybe even for the people who say that, like, it's important to be self-aware as well. Yeah. Those people that you mentioned don't want to wear sleep trackers are already fully self-aware that they have a lot of other things that they need to manage stress-wise. Yeah. And so adding that in, they probably quite like their sleep at the moment. It's like a peaceful experience. They don't want to make it a stressful experience. Yeah. For me, I don't necessarily feel the same stress from a job perspective. So I like to apply a little bit of tweaking to my other areas of life.
Totally. But that's because this is essentially our industry, is how we enjoy it, we geek out on it.
I think it's for someone our enjoyment as well.
Yeah. But whereas someone that's trying to get healthy and are being, we're giving them training, we're giving them nutrition, and then we're throwing more stuff at them, you can see how that would just be like, okay, this is just, I feel like I'm failing on everything, I just give up, and they throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think there's that. Yeah.
I think a lot of people tend to come to a coach to handle those things, and when they feel like you're putting it back on them, it's off-putting, right?
We want you to do it, but it's almost like drip feeding them habits, right? I don't overload clients with 100 habits all at once. It's like just what you can manage, and don't let it stress you out. Just do what you can. Do better than you did the day before. Yeah.
I think to caveat that, and the flip side of that is for those people who tend to be stressed about sleep, who maybe don't have a particular area of stress, or just say no because they don't want to figure out how bad it is. I very much approach that in the same logic of finding out your weight for the first time if you haven't weighed yourself, or finding out your body fat percentage. It's like, it's important to have a line in the sand.
Yeah, of course.
And not every scenario, but a few different cases I can think of where the people who really do need a bit of an insight into their sleep, or know what to need to change, or don't have very good sleep habits, are the people who don't want to track it.
Yeah, fair. And you know what? Quite often it's the same people that are having an espresso at 5 p.m. or after dinner.
Exactly.
It's like, dude, that has to go.
It's the people watching the box sets till like 1 a.m. that are like, oh, I don't want to track my sleep because it will stress me out. I'm like, okay, but have a bit of like self-reflection here.
Yeah, totally.
And so I think that whole concept of stressing about your health, when if you can if you can lower your stress, even if you lower your stress with non-healthy things,
Yeah.
I think that does have to have a little bit of a pinch of, like you said, Warren Buffett's one person.
Yeah.
But returning to a core foundation of routine,
Totally.
I think is always going to be.
I agree with you. There's degrees, right? Like I'm not saying ignore the stress and there's sticking your head in the sand, and then there's like overstressing. But somewhere in between is exactly where we're sort of talking about, because you get people on both sides of the spectrum. You know.
And I think I think it's for those people who might hear that and say, oh, like, it really helps my stress to have like full sugar sodas or like whatever, not even exercise any day of the week. And it's like, there is a line.
Yeah.
But the underlying principle for me is it shouldn't be an unenjoyable experience on every level. And I think a lot of people, particularly around this time of year, particularly coming into January, the uptake of extreme routines is high. So many people be jumping into like 75 hard come January.
Yeah.
Going.
Yeah. Sorry, I think you meant before Christmas. Is like routine of going and drinking mulled wine every night. Yeah.
No, but come New Year, the people with January ambitions and like New Year, New Me, that whole mindset does kickstart this completely unsustainable approach, particularly with health.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if it's just me in the industry, but I like more and more people seem to be doing like wildly dumb shit every single January.
Totally.
Right?
Totally.
New diets, new crash things, like new schemes and routines and things. And I think just maybe a touch on that. There is obviously a spectrum of sometimes a unsustainable approach can be beneficial if you appreciate it for what it is.
Yeah.
It kickstarts you into something that's better than what you were doing.
Yeah.
And then you kind of find a middle ground and move forward.
Yeah.
A lot of reviews I've seen of 75 hard, for example, are like, oh, this is my 75 hard. I finished it, and this is what I do now. And they've always taken 30% of what they did and kept it. But talk to us about like the concept of trying the things that are uncomfortable and then like taking and keeping the best bits and how that sort of like molded your routine.
Well, I don't know exactly that, but I want to touch on your point there about people taking on just so much all at the start. It's just too much at the start of the year, these unrealistic goals, and just too much too soon. And then, they throw it out after a couple of weeks or they can't sustain it. It's almost like, I don't know if you're the same. I was talking to a trainer mate of mine a couple months ago about this. And if I want to get lean for a holiday or whatever, maybe I've got a couple of kgs to lose. What I will do is not something that I will advise my clients to, because I'm constantly trying to teach them that you need to adhere to a diet that is sustainable and gets you towards your goal. Now, I generally have that, but if my weight sneaks up a little bit, I will do crash dieting for 2 weeks, and I know that it's not sustainable, but I will do crash dieting, overtraining, as I said, because I know after a week, 2 weeks, I'll actually come back stronger. So I'll specifically overtrain and undereat, knowing that it's not sustainable, but I basically know what I'm doing. And I know that when I come back from that holiday, I know how to get back on track. But for those people that maybe don't have a good baseline, you've got to teach them that sustainable baseline first before you bring in all those tricks. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Can't start with the crash.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the cheating reps. You've got to do the full reps first, and then you can learn to cheat. So.
I think as well, knowing on the note of like rapid results in short time frames, like with holidays and weddings and stuff, having the foundation that you deviate from is really important. That's a good point. But also knowing what to push really hard at is also key. And I think, all problems come back to basically, if you're a beginner, get some guidance, figure out what works for you, build the foundation, and then deviate. I think generally as a concept that answers all questions of like, I find training boring, I want variety. It's like, okay, find the foundation, then deviate.
Yeah,
it's like totally like, I don't want to diet forever. Like I want to lose a lot of weight, but I just want to eat what I want. It's like, okay, find the foundation.
And then you can do that.
And then to a degree. Yeah. And I think when it comes to habits and stuff and pushing for those fast results, once you've built the foundation, you know what you feel comfortable doing, and that really crank up.
Yeah.
I would personally never do a run every day challenge, because I know that like anytime I run a little bit more than 3 times a week, like it does have an impact on my joints and my knees.
Yeah, me too.
But I would bike every day.
Yeah.
You know, and I think I wouldn't have, or not that I wouldn't, but having that understanding in my body is like the key. Yeah. Either failing something like that, like where you go hard for 4 weeks, or making it through.
But that's what I think is important to let clients and our future clients know, is that people naturally become aware of that. All you need to do is sort of stick to a new healthy lifestyle for a month or two months, and then your body's actually going to tell you anyway. It's not like it's much harder once you've had a decent enough of time with on a new habit, new lifestyle. As long as you listen to your body's going to tell you if you're eating shit on the couch every day. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not about, oh well, this is what makes me happy and this is my enjoyment. It's like you will no longer enjoy it because your body's reached a new baseline of, you didn't realize how good you could feel when you were having just bad habits. And that's one of the things that is great to see clients suddenly aware of. They're like, I just feel so much better. Yeah. And then they try to go back, well, not try, but they go back to their old habits, and they realize how horrible it makes them. It's like, okay, well, you were living that for 3 years. Yeah. You just weren't aware of it because you didn't know what the other side was. That's what normal felt like. Yeah, exactly. So finding that new normal, that new baseline, it's almost self-regulating, because it's rare for someone to come off the wagon if they've given that habit enough time, because they just want to keep chasing that better feeling, you know?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think a lot of people, well, I had this specifically, this feedback from a client of mine who went on holiday and didn't drink for the first time ever.
Yeah.
And it was his first time out of the UK where he chose not to drink.
Wow.
And he was like, I'd been training him for a few years, and every time he'd come back, it would be the same thing of like, oh, let's start picking things back up. You know, the week off was like crazy. I feel like I need a holiday from my holiday.
Yeah.
That's literally what he used to say.
This time he remembered his holiday.
And this time, not even remembered it, but it was like, I feel so relaxed. Yeah. I feel ready for work. I feel like we can pick up right where we left off. And we don't have this whole like catching up thing to do from a perspective. I think, not that you can't go and enjoy yourself, and like you said, like Christmas is coming up. It's definitely going to be that time where you switch things into relaxation mode. But like that new level of normal is really interesting. And the concept of people considering where they're at as normal, and even being aware that there is
you're guilting me into going sober for my next holiday. I'm already thinking about that and going, oh no. Yeah. No, it's a good point though.
It's a spectrum.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Soda is the secret. It's the key to the answer to your success.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's wrap up with a few questions from a bunch of people. So we've had these sent in, and I just wanted to try and give like summarizing thoughts on like this topic as a single question. So like, how hard is it to really overtrain?
Yeah, so this is we sort of touched on this before, but overtraining, it's most of the people telling you that they're overtraining probably aren't, or not to a degree that they need to be worried about it. You're less likely overtraining. It's more likely that you're under recovering. Yeah. You know, if you feel like you're overtraining, it's normal to be sore after a workout, especially if you've just recently changed your workout, or you've changed the phase, you've progressed things. But you know, how is your sleep? How is all the things? Are you eating well? All that sort of stuff. Tick those boxes first.
Yeah. So make sure you try a week of training where you are sleeping well, you're eating well. Yeah. And then if it's still a problem, then consider looking at your training.
And also what I said before, if your training is really something for your mental health and you benefit a lot, and you go, oh, should I really want to train today, but I'm sore? It's like, no, just go and train. Look, you're not competing. You're not going to have to do like a powerlifting comp of your 1 rep max. Like, don't worry about it. Just go careful, respect the technique and so forth. You do all your mobility, and you'll be fine. You'll most likely be fine.
Yeah. Nice. What about the use of like cold exposure? I know you spoke about ice packs, but typically this question is in response to like ice baths and cryotherapy. Yeah,
I'm a massive fan of it, and I haven't done it for it is like a muscle that you train. So the longer you haven't done it, like it petrifies me just thinking about it. I never enjoy it. I absolutely hate it. But that's not the reason that I do it. It's about how you feel afterwards, and I do like that feeling. I think it's if you haven't given it a go, give it a go. And I think it's you know, it's got proven benefits. Sometimes they're overstated. Sometimes people aren't sort of commenting from a standpoint they don't understand because they've never cold plunged before. The sort of the naysayers on it. But I think everyone give it a go. Just be cautious. You don't have to go the coldest temperature for the longest time. Like minimal effective dose is best, particularly for women. I think we were talking about this before. Like women have to be a bit more careful with cold plunging. This again, we can give a link to it's a really good podcast with Huberman on this.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Cool.
What about like how much of that do you think is mental benefit compared to a physical benefit?
For me, it's all mental. Like I don't notice the any of the physical benefits. I mean, I'm cold. I'm really cold, but it's the endorphins, and I just feel it's like it's doing something really, really difficult. I think that's the payoff. Like you've done something really, really difficult, and it's like a sense of achievement.
Yeah.
You could say, well, why don't you just go and do a gym session instead, or do a run? I could do those, but I've done them before, and I know what they feel like. I like this thing is short and sharp. You get it done. It's also a community. I've got a really cool group of mates that I do it with when we do it. But there's a lot of aspects to it. I think more mentally than physically.
Yeah.
On the physical note, there's a theory, or it stands up. It's physiologically you shouldn't ice bath straight after a strength session or lifting session if your goal is hypertrophy, because you will blunt that anabolic effect. Because obviously for hypertrophy you want inflammation in your muscles.
Yeah.
Now again, how much is that effect? Like, is it really going to like eliminate all your gains that you get from that session, or is it just a little bit? So weigh it up. If you've reached your sort of genetic potential, you're not too worried about it, have an ice bath afterwards.
Yeah.
I actually, if I'm going to do it, I do prefer to do it before a session, and obviously I spend more time warming up, mobilizing, because obviously you're cold, so you need to be more careful. But it's that I do feel more awake. I feel I'm energetic, because
right.
I think your body just switches into like that stress response, like right, we need to warm up. So you're more alert. So I actually prefer it in that sense rather than afterwards. Afterwards, I'd prefer a sauna. And I can do cold with a sauna, but yeah.
Yeah, that's typically how I do it. And I've never done an ice bath before a gym session, but that scares me.
It's good. It's good, mate. No. It's
I get how you feel energetic.
No, it's great.
But
normally when I train, I'm like walking to the gym. It's a little cold. I'm already cold.
Yeah.
I don't even more cold.
Yeah.
But I do get that. After
takes a bit of getting used.
Yeah. After I would be so if you're lifting, and then you go to a sauna, and then you implement some cold plunges with your sauna, but it's after. Does the same theory apply of the stunted hypertrophy?
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, because you're kind of flushing your muscles, but you're then vasodilating again, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's probably going to have less of an effect, but probably not by much.
Yeah.
I would typically be a fan of like throwing it in at the end of a recovery session.
Yeah. If you have access to a sauna, there's so much more. I love cold plunging, and I love the research for it, but there's even more research on how beneficial saunas are. So if you have access to a sauna, that's in longevity terms, that's a gold standard.
Yeah. And in respect of sauna, is it just total time that you're going for, or is it rounds?
Yeah,
to and from, or typically approach?
I think it's someone said something like four rounds of 15 to 20 minutes per week is when you're getting a really good dose. And I struggle to do more than one sort of 15-minute round per day. And this is one area where I do use my Garmin, because I'll sit in there. I'm just sitting, and if I start to creep up to around 120 just sitting, I'm like, that's when I cut it. And that tends to happen between 15 and 20 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, unless I've cold plunged before. If I've cold plunged before, obviously I can last a little bit longer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. I mean, yeah, I think for those guys who have saunas, like, use them often for sure. But I used to go in way less than that, and I realized that's wrong now. Of like, you go into warm up at the end of your gym session, and you'd leave.
Yeah, no, it's got to get pretty squirrely before you leave. Yeah.
15 minimum. Yeah. Okay, cool. What about from a recovery standpoint, blood flow restriction bands, or even the electric tools that you that like constrict? From a recovery perspective, I know you can use them to lift lighter, and still get a good sort of like hypertrophic response. But in response to like recovery, not in a session, how would you how would you go?
I don't know about recovery. They're great for rehab, though. They really do. I mean, the research stands up. Like blood flow restriction, you can train at lighter loads and get hypertrophy, and the e-stim can really help. I think people that are going and doing e-stim without injuries and they're just trying to get extra stimulation of your muscle, well, you need to be able to train your nerves. You need to be able to train that signal from your brain to the muscle yourself, rather than an outside modality. So yeah, it can help maybe someone that's injured, but
if you is the one with the pads that you put
on. And annoyingly, Ronaldo did the friggin' ad where he sits on the couch and just has it. So everyone's like, oh, I can sit on the couch and get abs. It's like, no, that's just the worst perception. Like, right. It's all about, we talked about this proprioception. Like, it's all about how your brain connects to your body and connects to your muscles. So yeah, if you want to supercharge that with some electrodes, fine, but make sure you're doing the work as well. Okay. Not just relying on the e-stim.
The blood flow I saw was like the band. It's like a tonica that you put on, but then it blows up and it restricts.
Yeah, so basically keeps the blood in the muscles. So you're getting that accumulative fatigue, like that the muscle's just not moving. So you're getting all those all that breakdown of tissue.
Okay, yeah, and that's still. Would you say that's beneficial to use when you are not training, as opposed? Like, one of the things that I think we both agree on is using it in training was lifting lighter to aid recovery, or not to aid recovery, to aid rehab, to actually train your muscle harder. But what about the use of it, like, say if you've trained in the morning at 10 and you're sitting there at night with it on your thigh or whatever at 6 p.m.?
I don't know. I wouldn't see any benefit to that, unless you're doing a few sort of leg extensions while you're sitting there. I don't know. I would have thought something like a compression sock would be better to help your blood flow and just keep flushing everything through your muscle, getting that blood flow, delivering all those amino acids and gains, and getting rid of all the cell metabolites and clearing them all out. You know.
What about from the restriction perspective, the like boots, the Normatec boots and things like that?
Oh yeah, stuff like that. So I thought you meant like the bands, like the ones that take. Yeah. Yeah,
but now moving into that, I know that's
well, Normatec's awesome because you're getting compression and you're getting that cold water flow. So it's just helping. It's helping your circulation. It's helping recovery. Awesome for endurance stuff. Yeah. For people with sort of muscle building as their priority, is that a good thing? You know, yes, you want to be flushing blood through your muscles, but you don't want to be reducing inflammation too much, because that inflammation immediately after a session is what's helping the muscle grow. That's the anabolic effect, taking effect. You know, so yeah. I think great for endurance, and if you're really overtrained, sure. If you're feeling some significant DOMs, go for it.
Obviously, just for the lower body. For the upper body, just some good old fashioned rest.
Yeah. Can wear compression tops, you know. If you want to, but otherwise you just rest.
And what about like compression gear in session?
Yeah.
Or is that's not advised?
I'm just thinking of the dude that stands in the squat rack, fully kitted out in compression.
Well, so when I think of compression.
Yeah.
I'm not. So yeah, that's actually maybe a good point. Is like the tights or just general tight clothing, like a compressive t-shirt or long sleeve vest, or the full leggings for guys. That's kind of where my mind goes. But then there are like compression knee bands, ankle things as well. Right?
Yeah, and that's generally for sore joints and so forth. And that compression isn't just helping the knee feel stable. Again, it's that proprioceptive feeling. Your body knows that there's this brace on it. So not only are you more aware of your knee, but it feels nice and cuffed, like supported.
Sure.
But going back to that guy standing in the squat rack with his tights and compression leggings on, wear shorts over the top. Like, you know, if you've seen those guys, like, come on, it's just like no one needs to see that.
Yeah.
No one needs to see that.
That's the look.
Yeah. Typically like a powerlifter look as well.
Yeah, but it's only not powerlifters.
Squats, deadlifts.
Yeah, technique wise, they don't look like they know what they're doing. They've just got their dick on show. Like that's basically it.
Yeah. So if someone was interested in this compression, the difference between like just wearing the leggings, even like under your clothes in the day and stuff, compared to wearing those like more restrictive, like almost like a brace type knee sleeve.
Yeah.
Is there one that works better than the other?
Yeah, well, I think the knee sleeve and stuff, that's more injury specific. Say someone who's got dodgy knees or their knees feel better, you know, cuffed like that during the workout. Whereas the full length compression, that's someone that's hoping to help blood flow and sort of get rid of all the sort of the muscle pain or the lactic acid, the buildup. Which lactic acid isn't necessarily a bad thing, by the way, but you know, those are people that are more obsessed. Generally, they'll be endurance athletes that are trying to recover faster.
Right.
You know, I don't think a lot of guys that are into their hypertrophy and bodybuilding necessarily, if they find benefit from it, sure, but I don't think it's as necessary because, as I said, you kind of want a little bit of that inflammation straight away, because that's the muscle, that's the anabolic effect.
Yeah. And then the whole thing of these kind of like compression gear, I'm thinking typically more like the ones for injury, like knees, elbows, maybe even ankles. Compared to something maybe like K-tape. Is it both things trying to achieve the same thing?
Yeah, well, a lot of K-tapers, they say it's sort of proprioceptive. Like the K-tape that's put on without any sort of much tension, it is literally just proprioceptive. It's not really
just your brain thinking that it feels more
feeling that area. It's not really doing much. But there are sort of, you know, you can strap an ankle pretty good with K-tape. You can put enough tension through it. So yeah, you can give some really nice strappings. I'm always a way bigger fan for strapping a joint rather than a brace. It's way more minimalist. It just feels better. And those are from my rugby days and strapping the knees and the ankles. It's just better. It's better support. But obviously, it's temporary. You can't just whack it on. Yeah.
And how far does it go when someone just feels like they can only work out with that? So if they wear a knee sleeve because their left knee's dodgy, and then after 6 months they're still wearing the knee sleeve.
Oh, look, it's not doing any harm. Go for it. I totally get your point. Like, is that a case of that fear that we talked about at the start about pain? Is it now wired into them that they need to have that brace, otherwise they're not going to be able to perform or they're going to injure? It's like, look, if it's not doing any harm, fine, go for it. Because you know, even if it isn't a problem, you know, that could be a few months on, they do tweak their knee. They're going to blame the fact that they weren't wearing the sleeve. But yeah, I don't see a problem with that. Like it's you know, it's each to their own.
Yeah, you know. Nice. And then I remember like when I ran my marathon, I had my whole knee K-taped up. Yeah. And the whole like belief that it's feeling better because you've got that there is definitely a thing.
That's the thing, yeah. And if that works, like whether well, you probably had it straight, you had a bit of support from it as well. But you also got to remember that tape is going to cause compression, which again could be very nice for your joint. So it's very easy to think that it's helping. So you know, it likely is.
Yeah. I just remember it kind of like the whole emotional roller coaster of marathon is like severe enough by itself.
Oh yeah,
as it is.
Yeah, yeah.
I started and like 3 miles in, it started peeling off.
Oh no!
And it came off, and I was like, oh, now I'm.
Oh no! And that did your yeah.
And then it just went up and downhill from there. And then 3 miles after that, I was like, it actually feels exactly the same as it did before. I'm going to be all right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like the fear more than anything else.
Cool. Yeah. All right, man. That's all the questions. Is there anything else that you want to cover?
No, that's it. I think we've rambled on for quite a long time. I hope people appreciate it. We'll see how we go. Sure. Yeah.
Well, yeah, appreciate you. Thanks for sharing the knowledge. And I'll leave all of your bio and stuff in the description.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Matt. Well, we'll include these links as well for products that we've mentioned.
For the supplement.
Yeah.
Podcast. Sweet, brother. Cool, man. All right. See ya.